Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. Since last year's Synod on the Family wrapped in Rome, an intense discussion has continued inside and outside the Catholic Church, touching on doctrine and pastoral approach toward families. Over the past year, I've spoken at length with two of the men who came to personify each side of the often contentious debate between church teaching and pastoral mercy. Cardinal Walter Kasper, who proposed a penitential path that would allow divorced and remarried Catholics a quick return to the sacraments, and Cardinal Raymond Burke, one of the world's foremost canon lawyers, who urged the protection of the annulment process and the indissolubility of marriage. Tonight, we bring you the best of those conversations to set the stage for what will be discussed at the Synod in Rome, this global gathering of bishops in the coming weeks. Here's an encore of the best of my interviews with Cardinal Kasper and Cardinal Raymond Burke. Your Eminence, for decades, you have been arguing that there needs to be mercy extended to divorced and remarried Catholics in the form of communion, granting them communion under certain cases. Do you feel you are close to achieving that end now with this Synod coming and where the Holy Father is?
This I do not know, because I left it open. I did not want to anticipate the Synod and the decision of the Holy Father, and therefore it's not a firm proposal, there are questions. And I get a lot of agreements, but also a lot of critiques, and there's a tension there. Now I propose to those who prepare the Synod to prepare a text which can get the agreement of the great majority. It's the same method also we had in the Council.
So your proposal was put forward, and it was controversial.
Of course it was.
But you have said, and I'm quoting you, the Pope approved of your proposal. You said clearly this is what he wants. Do you agree with that still? And are you speaking for the Pope?
No, of course, I spoke beforehand with the Pope. It is not a conference, an academic realm. It's an important issue before the cardinals. And he was in favor to open the debate, but not a certain proposal. And I did not ask him what he wants, but he wanted to touch the problem and to open the debate. This he wanted. And this I did. But then I had the impression he was, more or less he agreed what he said afterwards to the cardinals. It was not against his opinion, but I cannot say that I have now made the proposal of the Pope.
No, because at the time of the Synod, I know there was some reportage where you were saying that you were speaking for the Pope and you understood his mind. Was that an exaggeration, or do you stand by it?
That's an exaggeration. I was expressing his mind in the sense that he wanted debate about all these problems. He's for openness and for frankness, and he says it does not help to suppress the questions.
I want to explore this a little bit, just so the audience fully understands what is at stake here and what the proposal that we're talking about. It really is a proposal to allow divorced and remarried Catholics to return to the sacraments with some haste, correct?
Well, I am for discernment situation by situation. I had never said everybody who is divorced and remarried can go to the sacraments. Every situation is different.
Right.
And we need confession fathers with experience who can speak with the people. It's a whole process. And then to come to a discernment of the situation, they help also to the people to have a discernment about the situation, and then perhaps he can give the absolution.
How do you preserve the indissolubility of marriage, that ideal, when you have what is essentially a fast track back to the sacraments for people in irregular unions of whatever sort?
Well, first of all, indissolubility of marriage for me is face of the church. And because it's the word of Jesus Christ, you cannot create exceptions. But it's a question how to apply the word of Jesus to concrete situations. It's a question of, and I thought the church has the authority to bind and to loose, and the church can, in certain cases, make use of this authority.
So you're distinguishing between doctrine and pastoral practice. Are they two separate things?
No, they are not separate. This would be the doctrine. Practice must be founded in the doctrine, but you cannot deduce directly from a dogma to a concrete praxis.
Right, but in this case, though, when you say there's an indissoluble marriage and someone has divorced and then found somebody else, and then they come to church and say, I want the sacraments, Cardinal Sarah said, you have a first marriage that is ratified and consummated. Now you have a second union of some sort. And when these people come forth and we allow them to have communion, he says it's a heresy, a dangerous schizophrenic pathology. You would say what?
Well, it's a strong statement.
Yeah, I'll say.
Very strong, but I cannot agree with this statement because, well, what makes impossible the access to sacraments is to live in grave sin. That's a canon law. But grave sin is not only a grave materia, but there must be the conscience and the intentionality, there must be the circumstances. The concept of grave sin is a very complex one, and therefore it needs a discernment case by case, whether there is the situation of grave sin or not.
But there seems to be this dual track, though, because we're saying you want to preserve the indissolubility of marriage, yes, but the application of communion and how and to whom it is distributed might be another issue over here. But
no, it's not another issue. And when this man or this woman is not in the personal situation of grave sin, and this happens,
They're not in a situation of grave sin?
It's objectively, but if they're subjectively, that's a problem. Grave sin implies the personal conscience, implies the intentionality of the will, and therefore it needs a judgment of a priest who has experiences.
But not a tribunal. You don't like the idea of the nullity process, the canonical process.
This is a different thing. Of course, this can help in certain cases, this nullity process, but the Church always distinguishes between the forum internum and the forum externum. And I think the discernment, whether a person, a concrete person, lives in grave sin or not, that's a question of the forum internum, not of the forum.
Yes, but don't you have an external problem of, okay, I decide to find a younger wife, and I leave my wife and 3 children, and I come to you and I say, but Father, I'm really in love with this person. Doesn't my wife aren't the wife and children, the first wife and children, entitled to justice?
But in this case, no spiritual father and director would say he can come to the sacraments. But I will tell you another example. When I was bishop, a priest came to me and said, well, I have such a case, a woman which was abandoned by her husband. But she now has remarried, he needed a husband for her children, and she prepared in a wonderful way the girl for First Communion. And now the priest said to me, I cannot say on the day of First Communion to the girl, you can, your mother cannot. And the mother did all to prepare the girl. That's a different question if somebody leaves his wife and his children and goes with a younger woman.
But that's not speaking to the marriage and whether the first marriage was licit and the second one wasn't. That's a pastoral question, and not speaking to the nullity of the first marriage, is it?
The first marriage can be valid, was in this case valid, there was no process of nullity, but nevertheless.
It seems the Pope his mind is changing a bit. In his recent interview, he said, this does not resolve anything, referring to your proposal. and it is a result of overblown expectations.
Obviously, there are a lot of overblown expectations. I would also say there are many expectations that the whole sexual morality will be changed. I do not think of such a thing, and the Pope never thought such a thing. And he said that it does not solve anything to give only Holy Communion.
But you do see how the granting of Holy Communion is a physical sign of a shift in the doctrine. It is, isn't it?
No, it's not a shift in the doctrine.
Then what is it if it's not
a shift in praxis? And the practice is, but
isn't the practice a reflection of the belief and the doctrine?
That's too easy. You have praxis is founded in doctrine, but if you read St. Thomas Aquinas, tradition is much richer and much more differentiated than some cardinals who do not know so much all the things think.
But Your Eminence, most of the people, most of the divorced and remarried Catholics out there, they look in and they hear this or they read the paper. They're not reading Thomas Aquinas either. They're looking at the practice. And when they see divorced and remarried couples given communion, that conveys a message. And to quote the Pope, reality is more important than ideas. And shouldn't that be a concern?
But
the visible practice of the faith.
I did not make a proposal that every divorced or remarried people can come to Holy Communion. This is not my proposal, and this is a simplification. As a poor simplification to say, I have made this proposal, is that there are certain circumstances after a penitential way they have to do, and then in single cases, that's totally different from what you are blaming me now.
At the discretion of the local priest. That really is the proposal.
No,
the process
that's according to the old tradition of the Church, it's under the authority of the bishop. The bishop has, according to canon law, to appoint in every diocese a penitentiary. I do not know how it is in English.
Yes, penitentiary.
He must not do it himself, the bishop. He can appoint one, he can appoint two, he's free. And I think it can be given to some priests with experience.
I want to cover this question, what to do with remarried Catholics who are divorced and wish to enter into communion again. The Pope himself seemed to float the possibility of the Orthodox solution. And he put it this way. After a period of penance, he said, they give a second chance. They allow it. Your thoughts on that? And if that is a licit and valid way, historically speaking, and in the Catholic setting, to proceed?
I think that the clear approach is this. We begin with the words of our Lord when the Pharisees trying to trick him, asked him about Moses permitting divorce. And our Lord responded very clearly, it was not so from the beginning. In other words, he underlines that the indissolubility of marriage is part of the natural moral law. And then he teaches very clearly, he said, the man who divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery. And this teaching had to be very clear because the disciples themselves said to him, well, Lord, if it's that way, it's better not to marry. And then he reminds them that God gives the grace to those who are called to the married state. So if I am married to someone, it's not possible for me to be married to someone else because that marriage is indissoluble, it's for life. And so to say, to give another chance, what does that mean? It has no meaning. As long as I remain married to that person, that it hasn't been shown that the marriage, in fact, although it was entered in good faith, was null because one or the other parties withheld an essential part of the content of marriage consent, or one of the other parties was bound by a prior union or something like that. Then I'm called for my lifetime to be faithful to that marriage. And so they talk about second chances. And the Orthodox, it's very interesting, but I haven't heard a single Orthodox leader praise Cardinal Kasper's intervention and saying, well, isn't it wonderful that you Roman Catholics now have seen the wisdom of our approach? Because it isn't what it's being presented to be. And it's not clear. They don't talk about it as a real marriage. They talk about it as a penitential marriage, as some kind of an accommodation. But it's clear also, it seems to me, that they understand that they're in some way they're not doing what the Lord has commanded us.
Well, and the Archbishop in the book runs through the history. In the 9th century, there was sort of a liberalized form of allowing remarriage, but it was under duress and pressure from an emperor.
Exactly.
A Byzantine emperor at the time.
No, the whole thing can be traced to this, what they call Caesaropapism. In other words, the undue influence of the emperors on the patriarchs.
Now, I can almost hear, when you were reciting there a moment ago, Jesus' response to the Pharisees, I can almost hear Cardinal Kasper, whom in an America magazine interview recently said, and I quote, "We cannot simply take one phrase of the gospel of Jesus and from that deduce everything. Discipline can change." So I think we have here a theological fundamentalism that is not Catholic. You would respond how?
Well, if we don't take seriously every word of our Lord, I don't know who we are anymore. We're certainly not the church. We're not his mystical body. And secondly, to try to drive a wedge between discipline and doctrinal truth is simply false in the Catholic Church, because every discipline is at the service of a teaching or some sacred reality to safeguard it and to promote it. And that's why the Church has the discipline that she has. If it's being fundamentalist to hold strictly to the teaching on marriage, well, then I'm happy to be a fundamentalist.
I want to talk about something else Cardinal Kasper has raised. He says he is projecting and proposing a merciful process, described thusly, and I quote, "Divorced and remarried people should find a good priest who accompanies them for some time, and if this second civil marriage is solid, then the path of new orientation can end with a confession and absolution." What's wrong with that path of mercy?
What's wrong with the path of mercy is that it doesn't respect the truth. I've accompanied couples who are in an irregular union, tried to help them in the sense that some are in unions where they can't easily leave the union because of children or whatever. Tried to help them to lead a chaste life, to, in as much as possible, respect the truth of a prior marriage. And that's the ultimate goal. But how can now suddenly accompanying them in that way justify telling them a lie about the fact that they're bound to another marriage?
Yeah, he's basically saying if you have a confession and an absolution, you should be allowed back into communion. Well, that's nice for the individual. What does it say about the first marriage? And, and what is the state of the second marriage, which even he says is intolerable? It's intolerable, but it's something we have to accommodate.
Yes, in this whole discussion, I've often thought we ought to at least get back to the principle of non-contradiction. In other words, something cannot be true and not true at the same time. In other words, it's either marriage or it isn't. But you raise a very good point, which many people don't consider. In his conversation, his whole concern is directed toward one party who's now in an irregular union. Yeah. But that party is bound to another spouse.
And children.
And children, possibly. A whole series of relationships with the marriage. I shouldn't call it the first marriage because it is the marriage. And now suddenly to say, well, no, this person can enter a new union, is to say to the wife or the husband, whichever it may be, to possible children and to others who knew them in marriage, that the Church really doesn't respect the indissolubility of marriage. That yes, we teach that, but then on occasion when we act contrary to it. Well, that's simply unacceptable. And it's not good for the person himself or herself who we think we're trying to help by giving them a way out or a second chance, whatever you want to call it, of their situation, because the way to their salvation is to try to live as justly as they can in the sad, the tragic situation of a regular union. And secondly, it's certainly an injustice to the spouse of the person, to children, and to others for whom their married relationship was very important. People don't think about that. We hear this all the time at the Apostolic Signatures, sometimes when there are tribunals who are abusive and giving easy declarations of nullity. And we hear from the other parties and from their children, how can this be? That we were happily married for 20 years and had 4 or 5 children, and then suddenly he got taken up, my husband got taken up with some pretty young woman who expressed an interest in him, and he went off with her and abandoned us. And now the Church
is affirming that?
Exactly.
Your Eminence, I know you brought this proposal forward and have submitted it to the body of bishops, and you have really been out advertising it and trying to expose people to your proposal all over the world. Do you feel any responsibility for the phenomena that people have written to me about, priests particularly, of divorced and remarried couples, gay couples, presenting themselves after Mass and saying, we want communion, you should allow us to have communion, this is clearly what the Pope wants. Do you feel any personal responsibility for that phenomenon?
Well, this is a misunderstanding. First of all, it was a question, and I put the question to open the debate. It's not a proposal. And therefore, of course, now a couple can come, we want Holy Communion. I spoke about a penitential process, a penitential way. It needs time.
Can we talk for a moment about the question 9 in the questionnaire that was sent out after the last synod as a way for the dioceses and the world to talk about these big questions? And question 9 said, how can the Church give pastoral attention to families with persons with homosexual tendencies? Where did that come from? It didn't seem to be central to the discussion, and some of the bishops said this was sort of inserted at the last minute.
I do not know who inserted it. I never spoke about this problem. This is not, and it was mentioned, as I remember, in the Synod. It was not a central point in the Synod, and then it came in this intermediate report. But this intermediate report is not a document of the Synod. The question is not what we say about homosexual unions. The problem is how to help families when a boy or girl come and has this attraction, how to help them. And I think the council is a council about family, it's a council about marriage, and according to our Catholic understanding, such a homosexual union is not a marriage and is not a family. And therefore, I think it will not be a central point of the discussion.
What do you make of the Irish referendum approving gay marriage? Will that change, do you think, the considerations that the Church must have? Where Archbishop Diarmaid Martin there said, the Church needs to find a new language now to engage the young, and this should be a wake-up call.
Of course, the Church is not in favor of homosexual marriage. Bishops in Ireland were very clear about it. But to have a new language is a different thing, because our language, traditional language, is not the content, but the language is no longer really understandable for many young people. And therefore, it's right to say we must find a new language to have access to the young people, but it's not a changement of doctrine.
Cardinal Marx recently said that we should have an openness to these relationships, gay relationships. He said, because lifelong fidelity is right and good.
Lifelong fidelity is right and good, as well, but homosexual practice is a different thing. That's not the same. Well, I do not judge now about other bishops, and I have never spoken about these homosexual problems. When I am asked, I give the answer of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and I think that's Catholic.
Now you're hearing that perhaps contraception in the bond of marriage, that could be acceptable. We're hearing questions of same-sex unions, rainbow families, step families. Should these be part of the Synod discussions?
No, what should be part of the Synod discussion is the family as God created it from the beginning. And if the Synod can attend to that teaching, then it will provide for people who are in all these other kind of situations which are not right, will receive the help that they need. But we can't talk about, for instance, if people are, if two people of the same sex are living as if they're husband and wife, this is something which is always and everywhere wrong. This is intrinsically evil. We can't suggest that somehow we can incorporate that into our understanding of the family. And so we have to present to those who find themselves in these situations the truth about marriage, which is a call to conversion.
Our complete coverage of the Synod begins next week on a special edition of The World Over.